ding dong, the witch is dead. Everyone's saying that it was such a senseless, violent act. I want you to remind yourself that it was God's plan.
And I don't really give a shit that he's dead. Okay, that was funny. Ha ha ha, very funny.
I got this. I, on the other hand, do cheer when bad things happen to bad people.
They just have such different political beliefs from me. I don't care if you think that this is my own fault. Everything that they say makes me feel like such a shit person.
Today's video isn't to talk about the controversies of Charlie Kirk. I'm sure there are plenty of sources that are talking about that. There were a lot of strong feelings towards Charlie Kirk, with a lot of them being a lot more negative. And I am not really here to talk about my views regarding what he is known to believe and preach. However, I want to talk about the disturbing reaction to a human being assassinated. Charlie Kirk was a 31-year-old political public speaker who spoke primarily about his right-wing political views. On the 10th of September 2025, Kirk was shot during a university talk as part of his The American Comeback Tour, which proved to be fatal. He was shot in the neck in front of an audience of about 3,000 members. His wife and 2 children are now left behind. The video of his shooting disturbingly went viral online, with many people seeing the clip of his death circulating on the internet. Firstly, I don't believe media this graphic should be viewed or even just allowed online. There has been such a desensitization to death and traumatic events like these ones. Being able to view events like these, especially to platforms with limited age restrictions, is extremely concerning. Let's be honest, the content on TikTok is rarely age appropriate, considering you do have 13-year-olds on the platform. No 13-year-old should be seeing videos like this circulating online. Honestly, not even all adults would be able to handle seeing content this graphic. Studies even show that repeated exposure to seeing content like this can contribute to anxiety and depression, and again, desensitization. That is such a worrying societal issue. I do understand the argument of needing to raise awareness and to not put our heads in the sand when it comes to traumatic or important events. However, I don't believe it is suitable for everyone to be viewing, as not everyone is in the right position to be viewing content like this. I do also think there is a point we are speaking so openly about things like this to the point that people are just desensitized to the fact that these are real people losing their lives. So this video, I want to go into the reaction to Charlie Kirk's death, as I have found it extremely disturbing. Yes, his views weren't amazing in my opinion, but I also don't think his death should be celebrated. No one should lose their life due to a conflict in political views. He had a family. Daughters will now have to live their life without a father. A mother and now widow having to deal with her own grief, with now being a single parent who will also now need to help support her children in navigating their own grief at such a important time in their development. He would have had friends, family, all who will now be dealing with the loss of a loved one. Again, the argument should come into question, should you be fearing for your life just because of sharing your views? Again, I'm not really supportive of the views he shared, but I don't agree that he should lose his life for them. Some of his comments have knowingly sparked outrage across the years, but the people who are against violence in war, and rightly so, and who have vocally been very against his comments, are now supportive of his death and supporting this violence. So why should people only be able to suit the narrative for their own benefit? There have been many videos online in support, in response, chat forums, comment threads of people just celebrating his death. I fear one day his children will see this, or just his grieving family. No death should be celebrated. And again, I just think it comes down to it's so concerning how desensitized we are to death in general. Do we just see too much of it in the media? Is it just too trivialized in modern society? Has social media had this effect? Sky News had an amazing reporter kind of sum this up.
But I was stunned and disgusted to see some of the media coverage in the wake of this murder, tweeting out awful things, effectively saying that he deserved it. Now, you would expect this from nutjobs on the internet, but what about proper newsrooms? TikTokers, cretins who delight in misery and openly wish death on those who have different political views.
Showing how even the highest caliber of news reporters are just downplaying the severity of the situation. News reports would be sharing Charlie's views before they even announced Charlie's death. TikTokers are sharing disgusting clips of them lip syncing to songs celebrating Charlie's death. People are ultimately saying that his death was deserved amongst many variations of this viewpoint. Regardless of your views politically, I worry if you are cheering on the death of another human being. The response has been deranged, disgraceful, and just morally wrong. The people who are celebrating his death are the same people debating morality to others. As I have mentioned before on this channel, parasocial dynamics online are seeming to cause large amounts of problems like these on online communities. Celebrities and influential figures are almost being seen like characters with information about them just being readily available online and easy to access. Therefore, when we hear the deaths of these people, of these celebrities, and especially these more controversial figures, the internet has kind of formed this evil character arc, thus creating an almost death of a character and an evil character scenario. This disconnect between a real person and a scenario or character, I believe, is fueling the most bizarre reaction, as I don't think you would react this way if you saw the person as a real human rather than just a character or figure on screen or online. I also think our social media interaction is having a big influence on this. As a society online, we are driven for quick dopamine responses, likes, comments, maybe just even memes. We see something, we interact with it, and then we move on. There isn't really much room to reflect and just understand the real world implications of what we are viewing and taking in. I believe this is where we are just lacking empathy in these situations. I think there is also a concern for this becoming a very slippery slope. Once society begins celebrating someone's assassination, where exactly does it stop? Shouldn't we be encouraging the use of debate, elections, and democratic means instead of supporting violence? When we start to openly support deaths like this, aren't we just undermining the whole process of democracy and peaceful discourse? Because if the death of one political figure is seen as deserved by the opposing sides, what's stopping the other side from feeling the exact same way when tragedy strikes with someone they think deserves it, or they just disagree with? It creates a very dangerous cycle of dehumanization where people are no longer seen as citizens with families and lives, but simply as enemies who can be disposed of. That's not a healthy society. It's the logic of conflict and war, not democracy. The moment we are crossing that line, we stop being able to have real conversations, real disagreements, and just realistically the art of persuasion. We essentially end up validating violence as legitimate forms of political expression, which is not only immoral but deeply destabilizing for everyone involved. One last point I really want to discuss is the actual platform's response and role in this. There is also the responsibility that falls into the big tech platforms themselves. We cannot ignore that companies like TikTok, like X, like Facebook, like YouTube have all become the primary source of people taking in their news. When these companies allow for graphic videos of someone's assassination to circulate freely, or when they fail to moderate the flood of celebratory content that follows, they are complicit in normalising this behaviour. The question becomes, at what point does the pursuit of clicks, engagement and algorithmic growth outweigh the ethical responsibility to protect others and their users online, especially young ones, from engaging with deeply harmful material? By not stepping in, these platforms are indirectly validating the idea that death and violence can be used as entertainment. And if the viral spread of these clips is left unchecked, we risk training a younger generation to respond to tragedy with memes, jokes, and applause rather than empathy. Big tech does surely have the power to slow this down, but too often it seems that profit is valued over responsibility, and I think that should be deeply concerning for all of us. At the end of the day, this isn't about agreeing or disagreeing with Charlie Kirk's views. It isn't even about defending his legacy or challenging his critics. It's about recognising the danger of what it means when we as a society start to cheer on the violent death of another human being. Because once we allow ourselves to celebrate tragedy, we lose sight of our own humanity in the process. We forget that behind every headline, behind every viral video, there are families grieving, children growing up without a parent, and lives forever changed. If we want to live in a world where disagreements can exist without ending in violence, then we need to hold ourselves and the platforms that we use to a higher standard. Debate, accountability and peaceful discourse must remain the foundation of a normally or somewhat normally functioning society. The internet's reaction to Charlie Kirk's assassination should be seen as a wake-up call, not just about how we treat other people, not just about how we treat our political opponents, but about how quickly we risk losing empathy altogether. Because without empathy, all that remains is cruelty, and that's a future that none of us should want. So that's where I will leave it. We can disagree on someone's views, even strongly, without celebrating their death. I think the internet's response to this shows a lot more about us than it does about Charlie Kirk. If you've watched this far, please let me know what you think in the comments, but please just keep it respectful. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.